Rebuilding a Burnac Vulcan model steam engine toy, part 29. Painting and then unpainting the flywheel, as I decided that I didn't like it. Followed by a final steam test using the modified methylated spirit burner. This clip shows the flywheel sat on a piece of 3/16 of an inch diameter copper tubing, which in turn is clamped in a small vise. I didn't paint the flywheel with etch primer whilst it was in the vise. Instead, I held it in my hand by the piece of 3/16 pipe. The day after I painted it with the etching primer, I wiped off the overspray around the edge of the flywheel using a cloth and some cellulose thinners. The original idea was to paint the flywheel red, and I found an old tin of Humbrol gloss red, but unfortunately there wasn't any paint inside it. I have a few tins of LMS Crimson Lake paint. Here's one of them, made by Phoenix Precision Paints. It's really good stuff. And I thought it would be a good idea to paint the flywheel with this, but unfortunately it looked horrible. But I sprayed too much paint onto the flywheel and it didn't look right in Crimson Lake anyway. In the outer part of my workshop on some shelves I found an unopened tin of Phoenix Precision Paints Buffer Beam Red. And I proceeded to paint the flywheel using a brush. And I don't know where all the bits came from. I think it may be the paint. That particular tin has sat on a shelf in the outer part of my workshop for about 5 years. Is there a sell-by date on unopened paint? I really don't know, but it didn't go on very well, and the more I painted it, the more I hated it. There is only one thing for it. I'm going to use my unpainting brush. This is a paintbrush, but it's a special one. It doesn't paint, it unpaints. And here, running at a high speed, you can see the unpainting brush in action. At this point I was asking myself why I needed to paint the flywheel in the first place, as it looked perfectly fine as it was. And as my super Burnac Vulcan is quite a long way from an original Burnac Vulcan, I decided to remove the paint entirely and take it back to a steel finish. I left it in an aerosol cap containing cellulose thinners and the paint fell off. Then I put the flywheel back in the lathe and polished it up with some Scotch-Brite. I didn't want a mirror finish, I wanted a machine finish, in fact just like this. In my workshop that's built onto the house, I refitted the flywheel to the Burnac Vulcan, and here I'm filling the boiler using a syringe via the blowdown valve of the water gauge. I decided to put a bit more water in this time because the burner is much better. In the first steam test, using the original burner with the original cotton wicks, I struggled to raise any steam, even with the water level right at the bottom nut. I made a separate episode called Improving an Old Methylated Spirit Burner, which explains the difference between an original one and my modified one. Here I'm filling it with methylated spirit, or should I say methylated spirits. There's a bit of a debate here. Why does it have an S on the end of it? It's just one of those things. Back in the old days, that's what it was called. The volume of the burner takes 2 funnels full of methylated spirits. I put an S on it that time. And as it overflowed slightly, I wiped the burner and the surrounding part of the bench. Then I lit the burner using my small gas-powered blowtorch, which for a change did not burst into flame. Things are getting better. I placed the burner underneath the boiler. Then I thought to myself, I think I can improve this. I'm going to pull the burner out a bit more and get a bigger flame. Using a small pair of very long-nosed pliers, I pulled both of the wicks out of the holes slightly. And then I splayed out the top of the wicks, and suddenly there was a much better fire. I think it's time to put it back in the boiler. There's plenty of heat coming from this burner. It's quite ridiculous for its size. But that really is down to the wicks being glass fibre rather than cotton. Even though the heat from the burner is much improved, it's not going to start immediately. I need to raise some steam, so I'm spending a little bit of time lubricating every moving part. 9 days ago I finished 5 sessions of radiotherapy on my prostate because I have prostate cancer. As a lot of my viewers are about the same age as me, I do mention this periodically. After the treatment, I felt really tired. I continued to make videos on the days when I wasn't having radiotherapy. I like to keep myself occupied. 9 days after the radiotherapy, I'm starting to feel slightly better. The only real problem I'm having is with urination. Frequent visits to the toilet with a reduced flow. While I was waiting for the boiler to raise steam, I made a cup of tea. This should help things. I also thought at this stage it was a good idea to open the window above the area where I was working. Personally, I like the smell of methylated spirits, but you can get too much of a good thing. I started rotating the flywheel to clear the condensate, and in no time at all, the engine started to run on its own. After a final flick of the flywheel, off it went. I removed the Allen key and put it back in the box, and the engine was steadily increasing in speed as the parts all got warm. This steam test may look similar to the previous one, but it is entirely different. The boiler pressure still isn't excessive, there's not much pressure in there, but there's more than enough to make it do what it's supposed to do. I'm going to stop the commentary now and let you listen to the sound of the engine running. The small regulator on the block, which restricts the exhaust of the engine, definitely works. This particular version of a Burnac Vulcan, mainly because I made most of it, is entirely different to the original Burnac Vulcan that I have in every way. It really does run well. This video is heavily edited. The actual steam test lasted quite a long time, and here you can see that the flames are starting to die down a bit, but it's still running well. I think it's time for a bit of slow motion. All of the mess has now been used up in the burner, but the boiler is quite substantial, so it ran for a while without a fire. When I pulled the burner out, somewhat miraculously, it was actually still slightly alight. So I blew it out, and that is the end of the final steam test and the series. You will notice that the wicks of the burner are not burnt at all. All that's left to say is stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.